thing. I should know. I've been doing it for years now. Great to have you all back. This is the live version. If you're listening to it sort of around about the 16th of February, depending on your time zone, it's 9 p.m. in UK, and we've got a returning guest backed by huge popular demand. They were beating down the doors and breaking all sorts of COVID rules to sort of force me to bring you back. I didn't need forcing though. It's going to be here a great sort of evening with Dan the Flan, as we know, Dan Flanagan from Dadulthood. Going to be catching up with what's going on. But just before we jump into catching up with Dan and Dadulthood and all the things that they do to support men and fathers, as it is live, it'd be lovely to hear from you if you want to join in. There's a couple of ways: either post stuff on one of the platforms for streaming on. There are two: YouTube and also Facebook Live. Or drop me a WhatsApp or give me a call. It's +44 7506 319 745. That's +44 7506 319 745. Be great to hear from you. I'll check this thing out on a regular basis through the show. But as I am a bloke, if I do that, I won't be able to talk. Because I can't multitask. It's only one thing at a time with me. But there you go. That's all right. Anyway. Enough of that nonsense. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Noel. Thank you very much for having me back. I'm not sure about the public demand bit. I think there'd be a caveat around that because it's been about a year.
No, we've had all sorts of breaches of COVID regulations over here as people have been forcing their way in and demanding you back. So,
but you came onto our show as well, didn't you? You came onto one of our Dadulthood sessions.
Oh, yeah, you put me in a breakout room very sensibly, which was isolated away from everybody else in case I contaminated anybody with my nonsense.
That was particularly helpful. There's on a serious one, there was a lot of good feedback because outside of the dad chat and the laughter, we touched on quite difficult and tricky conversations. So to be able to have an intelligent conversation around some, quite potent subjects was, really enjoyable.
Good, thank you. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I really enjoy guys opening up and having a chat and challenging some of those stereotypes about men don't talk about stuff. We do. It just depends on the venue and the facilitation and support, is my view.
And who's going to listen? That's it. Either nobody's going to listen or you're going to be listened and be judged. So therefore, shut up and keep it to yourself because you don't sound like an idiot or Billy No Mates.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, it was great. I think your project is amazing, as I've said to you before, because I used to do father's work when, pterodactyls were flying around the planet, up in Scotland, in Edinburgh, of all places. And I managed to, I think, at most, engage with 4 guys over a period of 2 years.
Was that anything to do with Fathers Network Scotland? Because we're doing some work with them.
It existed at that point. This is really a long time ago.
Okay, yeah, that's
sort of like literally before anything else was happening. So, but your project is amazing, and the work around guys and fathers has come on leaps and bounds since those days, and I really admire the work that you do. Just so that there may be people listening either live or on the repeated podcast who think, "What is Dadulthood? What is he talking about?" Just if you don't mind, Dan, just sort of give people the sort of headlines on Dadulthood, what it is.
Okay, so the technical term is we're a revolutionary grassroots movement that uses art, tech, music, and play to battle social isolation in dads. Yeah. What that means without any of the jargon is that we organise kick-ass events and get together for dads and their children and dads on their own to encourage friendship, teach the dads maybe some new skills. Bottom line is that as you get older, your social groups shrink. Nobody actually wants to admit it. You have your workmates if you have that, or maybe your pals from university, they live in a different town. Most of your social life revolves around Facebook or maybe, some of the partners of people that your wife or partner has met on the school run, and they're not necessarily your people, which was my sort of story. So 5 years ago, I went through a series of different life changes, and I just got fed up of going to the park on my own or going to soft play on my own. And I just put a flag in the ground
saying, I'm not a weirdo. It's all right. I'm safe. I've got a child of my own.
Exactly. But we were actually laughing about this the other day. How easy is it for like mums to be in the playground, get chatting with somebody and exchange numbers and organise a play date? Do that as a man. It does not happen.
No, the police are going to turn up and drag you off.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. It just doesn't. And it just needs to change. So from the, very basic start of me just sticking a flag in the ground going, this is an issue, it needs to change. We've now got about 2,000 members. We've got Dadulthood in New Zealand, the Czech Republic, Germany. And it's basically these generation of fellas that are otherwise ignored, unlistened to, going through their own personal battles. Yeah. And just want to be part of somewhere where they can have a very honest conversation. They can maybe stick their hands up and go, I am a Billy No Mates. Yeah. Can I have somebody to play with? Back in the day, if you wanted a friend, you'd walk around the school and go, who wants to play army? And suddenly you'd have a group to play with. Yes, you can't do that as a 40-year-old. So, we do everything from stand-up comedy workshops, DJ workshops, junk modelling. The kids get a chance to come along, cause absolute chaos. Dads can come in, have a cup of tea, maybe make some friends, learn some new skills, show off skills that maybe they have, because there's always that, I always found that when my son's 9 now, but when he was little, he was really into building camps. And I felt useless at it because I hadn't built a camp in 30-something years. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
So, but there are you see these pictures on Instagram, and his dads have made some really cool tree houses or junk modelling. It's like, right, I want to know how to do that. So, wait, Bob, you're really good at that. Come over here, teach us how to do that, and in return, I'll teach you how to DJ or something that I've got to
camping anytime, Dan. I'd have shown you how to do all of that stuff, mate. It's some of my favourite stuff. What's also interesting for me, as a human being, but also as a professional in the field, is the positive pro-social nature of the group. It's not based upon sort of angry reactions to getting bad divorce results, which some of the groups do exist. I mean, I'm not judging them or saying it's right or wrong. It's just a bit monochrome and also a bit angry. And
there's a lot of hurt
like that going on in Dadulthood, which I love.
Right. There's a lot of hurt out there, and I can relate personally to some of those. But it's never about that. Quite a lot of our main champions are mums, because they see the benefits, or they see the effects on their partner from the social isolation. They can see they're struggling. Yes. Or, bottom line is, they just want them out of the house for a couple of hours. So it's like, just send them our way. So, get rid of them. So we've got
go to the pub, go anywhere. I don't care. Just get out from underneath my feet.
Take the kids and bugger off. Yeah. So we've got a lovely army of mumlessolies that are absolutely championing it. I got a lovely email a few months ago from the ex-partner of one of our volunteers saying how much it's helped him and his confidence and their relationship as well, because he's now he's part of something, and that was really missing. And we tend to withdraw rather than put ourselves forward because of that social anxiety or financial situation. And we have dads that are happily married, we have co-parents, stepdads, dads that have gone through the adoption process, dads that are going through grieving. There is no... I was talking to somebody about this the other day, actually. They were trying to set up a group, and it was for unemployed dads. And I said, all you're doing is ghetto-sizing these people.
That's the whole point. I was just to make this point. I think the reason why a lot of men's work and fathers' work has failed in the past is because people would focus on an issue that was a problem and think that would get guys involved, and it never did. And I understand why, because I wouldn't turn up.
No.
And I'm a professional in the field, and I sort of steer clear of it no barge pole is long enough as far as I'm concerned. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, it's not credible.
Yeah.
You know, there's people that need to be signposted to professional help, and that's brilliant. But for the majority of men, they're not at that stage. They're not ready. So what we do is facilitate those conversations, but in a very gentle way. We do it over a pint or a cup of tea, and then suddenly, you know, we do a dad's meetup once a month in a pub. We have 15 or 20 guys. Some of them are travelling in from over an hour away.
Right.
And you get there, and we'll talk nonsense, we'll tell jokes, take the mick, and then somebody will open up about being in recovery or how to support a partner with breast cancer. Or we had one lovely chap that turned up to our event last month, and bless him, he'd been living in a hospital because his 17-month-old had been on a life support machine for 4 months. And he hadn't been out. Nobody had asked him actually how he was.
Yeah.
And he's like, hello, mate, how you doing? You know, do you fancy a pint? And then all this stuff came out. It's like, whoa, you need to talk, don't you? So he could able to do that. No judgment, no sitting around a circle, you know, in a crappy church hall. It was just over a pint and with some friendly ears.
But this is the point, I think, that not the point, is this, that, and studies show this, evidence is, I mean, people say guys don't talk, it's not true. It's just that talking services are structured for a cultural group called women that are trained into talking in a specific way that services value.
Yeah.
And guys are trained in a different way, but always will, because guys are as much social animals as women are social animals and have exactly the same set of psychological, social, emotional needs. But the way you get to that point is different. And often, actually, if you just outright ask a guy what's going on, the shutters might come down. Whereas I think the activity-based stuff, the pro-social stuff, the fun-based stuff is literally where that juice is, really.
Yeah, I think we sort of get them in, not under a false pretense, because there is some people that just want to come in and come down to the woods with us and play Nerf wars and shoot their kids.
Yeah.
You know, great therapy in itself.
Well, shooting your kids is great. I mean, seriously.
Needs to be adopted more.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my boy is just he won't let me shoot him because he's winning. And maybe I should let him win. I don't know if we should have a vote on this thing. I don't feel I should.
You're setting him up for failure in later life.
That's right. Life's hard, and you've got to learn that when you're 11. Do you know what I mean?
It was quite lovely when we did it last summer, because we got all these fellas turned up, and you know, they're thinking, oh, this is an activity for the kids because this is how it normally works. Kids run off.
They're going to look in there.
Yeah, I was thinking, no, fella, you haven't got a bloody clue. Right. It was it's aliens versus zombie. Pick a team, get your gun, you're in.
I get dead.
They were into it more than maybe the kids were.
Absolutely.
But again, that takes those barriers come down. Because rather than going, oh, hello, I'm Andrew and I'm an accountant, I'm this, it's like, right, you're on the team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And suddenly a whole different conversation level and those social barriers just diminish straight away.
Yeah. And how has it been? Sorry, it's not a nice way, but I want to, because we've got quite a few topics to get through.
Yeah.
And I think that introduces Dadulthood very nicely. And we'll sort of, for folks that are champing at the bit, we'll put up the website and stuff like that. And if you want to join and be a member, I would encourage you. It's fantastic stuff. It really is. It's really, really clever. You mentioned as part of it, these Dadulthods are emerging around the world. And I'm guessing that, well, I know this, I'm not guessing, I know that's happened because of the pandemic. And I really want to talk about that as well and what's happened during the pandemic. And now that we are, I would say post-pandemic, to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. That's how it feels to me at the moment. What sort of impact did that have? What's it like now? And just before we get into that, I want to make like this one serious point. One of the things I'm organising at the moment is, and it's going to be an important thing. But there's three other organisations that have been on this show. I mean, there's loads of organisations, but three come to mind when I'm thinking about guys and why what you do is so crucial. And the three organisations exist because each of them are either family member, like there's two sisters and there's two mums who don't know each other. But one of the mums lost one of her sons to suicide, one of her twin sons. The two sisters lost their brother to suicide, a young man, and the other mum lost her son to suicide, who was 20. And this is why Dad Le Soul is really important, because if somebody's going to Dad Le Soul, it's really, really unlikely, I know the evidence is with me on this one, that there'll be some sister or mother setting up yet another charity because their son or their brother has taken his life. I mean, this is literally what we're talking about. This is life-saving stuff without all the heavy doodah that comes with it, right? It's life-saving stuff with nerf wars in the woods.
Yeah, I think there was the stats was something horrific. Like there was 96 men under the age of 45 every week being lost. And there's an amazing organisation called CALM, which is the Campaign Against Living Miserably, suicide prevention charity, and they did this project a few years ago that I came across. And the chap that did the creative on it, I got to meet and interview because he was a local dad. And I was just looking at these stats and thinking, Christ, that's me, that's him, that's most of my pals.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
I can name people I know who've done it.
Yeah,
walked into the sea, driven off a cliff, driven into a wall. I mean, one thing guys are really good at is how to plan to kill themselves. There's no coming back. It's absolutely fatal when they do.
Yeah, and it's 3 times more for men than it is for women.
Yeah, 75% of males, and we know that. So I want to frame it because you and I will just have a laugh because we go on really well, but there's a really serious substrate to all of this.
Yeah.
And particularly at this point in the post-pandemic period, I want to talk about work and identity and economics, because one of the things I was concerned about as a professional was that if we were going to see mass unemployment, we were going to see mass deaths of men, because that's what happens anytime there's mass unemployment. Guys kill themselves. Yeah. And the suicide rates go through the roof. It's one of the most closely researched and well-researched links is between poverty, unemployment, and male suicide and death. It's been around for sort of hundreds of years, that link. So tell me about the pandemic. What happened to Dad Le Soul during the pandemic, and what's happening now post-pandemic? Because like you had international growth, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a bit nuts. There was a lot of craziness. So obviously we are primarily events-based. Suddenly we can do nothing, yet the people that really need us are becoming even more isolated. Yeah. So we did like the rest of the world and went on to Zoom for a few weeks. I think 6 weeks in, we sort of linked up with some organisations in the States. Yeah. And we did the world's first international play date, which was wonderful because it was dads in the States and Kenya and Germany, all interacting together. Suddenly Zoom fatigue sets in after spending your basically your working life and trying to homeschool the kids via Zoom. Last thing you want to do on a Saturday is do that. So we moved. There was a lot of changes within the organisation. I pretty much lost 95% of our volunteers and our directors. There were some real challenges there as an organisation. And it came to the point, I think it was not last Christmas, but Christmas before. And I was like, can I actually do this? Because it was down to me and day one after this real steep level of growth. Yeah. And I remember being in the shower one morning because it was affecting me so much. I was having, I just wasn't sleeping. We had no funding, so how the hell do we keep the lights on? And it just came to a moment where going, this started because I saw a problem. I struggled myself, and I put a flag in the ground, and then I just went out handing flyers to strangers, and built and go, okay, this is what needs to happen. Then this is what's going to happen, and I kind of rebuilt it again. So we've got a brand new team of volunteers, right. Amazing helpers. We've got new contracts. It's gone really well. So almost going like that, it went, and it was day one again. And how the hell can we, we had funding to deliver projects that we couldn't deliver.
Yeah.
But then we still need, the insurance still needs to be paid. The lights still need to be kept on. So there was a lot of renegotiation with funders, and we built new projects. So we did what we call the Dad La Soul session. So one of our dads invested in this wonderful bit of technology called Remo, which is a conference facility. So it gets us away from Zoom and those horrible words. So the dads can move around in different spaces. We bring in keynote speakers.
It's great.
Yeah.
I liked it, totally.
Stand-up comedians. And then as lockdown started to lift, some of the fellas that met go, does anybody fancy a pint? Because I haven't had a pint for anybody for ages. And out of the community comes the dads meetups, which are thriving. Also, there's a lot of, I live in Worthing, just outside of Brighton on the south coast.
Somebody else too, that's all right, that's fine.
Yeah. I will smack you. I'm very proud to be in Worthing.
You would smack me if we weren't on Zoom. That's the whole point of being on Zoom, so I don't get smacked on a regular basis.
I'm repping West Side, baby. But no, there's loads of people that have they've up sticks and moved because they don't want to live in the city anymore, especially during lockdown.
Yeah,
so all these community of fellas that moved here didn't know anybody, had no chance for a social life. So when we were able to start the live events, they came back and stormed. So we're doing more numbers in terms of bums on seats at our events than ever.
You're maintaining the online presence as well?
Yeah, we're still doing the online sessions. We do our monthly dads meetups. We do the play dates. We were over in Chichester. We're just in talks to relaunch our send sessions, which we did a pilot of pre-pandemic, because if you're a dad that's got a child with additional needs, you're even more isolated because you can't go to soft play. You can't go there because essentially you're judged.
Yeah, no, it's the truth. I mean, people don't get this. It's like the so-called toddler and baby groups are not. They're women, they're mum and toddler groups, and that's fine. But if you turn up as a bloke to them, you're either going to be talked down and patronised, or it's going to be assumed that something you're there for nefarious reasons.
We had so many of those, the stories that have come out of dads being accused of being there for an affair. I got asked when I was doing it why I didn't have a proper job, because I was there on a Monday. Was I okay living off my wife? We had one of our dads that was accused of being a paedophile. Somebody else was basically asked to leave because the husbands and the partners of the mums that weren't comfortable with a bloke being there. So it's like, sod it, if you don't want us, we'll have our own thing, and we'll make the rules up for us. So it's gone, I'd say, from going really terribly bad, it's gone great. The send sessions particularly, they're the centre that we use.
For people that don't know, you mean special educational needs?
So anybody that's on the spectrum, we had, I think we did a pilot, and that was 14 dads and 18 kids. And that is absolutely unheard of.
That's huge. That is. I mean, people don't know. Like 4 years, in 2 years, I saw 4 fathers.
But this is a group of dads with additional needs.
Unreal.
So they were saying,
well done.
They desperately sort of needed it, and it was. I think there's a horrible stat that families of children with additional needs, sort of 85% of them separate or end up in divorce.
Yeah.
Because the additional pressures that are on there. So there are family support, and there's amazing family support group, but very little is done to support the men. But come along, we've got all this play equipment. We've got a very cool centre that somebody, this charity has gifted us on a Saturday. Just turn the volume down from the normal sessions. And if your child needs to have a meltdown, can have a meltdown. Child just wants to go and sit in the corner quietly, can do. Right. And it's fine. And I'll just make you a tea. And, you can come and see me when you need to see me. So
I suppose part of what I'm interested in, sorry, I mean, your level of work is amazing. I know that. You sort of skipped over a little bit, just how distressing it must have been when things were failing and then how overwhelmed you were to be on your own. I don't necessarily want you to go into that necessarily as an individual. You can do if you wish, but it was one of the topics we wanted to talk about was this whole idea of fathers and burnout and the lockdown, and talk about that, because I think it did sort of affect quite a lot of people. And it was actually in the media as well, wasn't it? Fatboy Slim was talking. What was he saying about it? What was his experience?
He'd gone back to obviously doing big live shows, but obviously during the pandemic, that's his career gone. So he's based about 10 miles away from where we are, and he did some wonderful things. He's got, I think, a 12-year-old daughter, so they started doing live.
I saw some of that,
and it was brilliant. But what I loved is that he was very honest.
She is an absolute star,
isn't she? But
the way she took the piss out of that guy was absolutely brilliant. She's real genius stuff.
They had the decks on a couple of baked bean tans. You know, they were zooming around the front room, and the front room was chaotic, and it wasn't some sort of pristine, you know, homes and gardens, millionaire's house. It was lived in, and that was lovely. He's got a cafe, the Big Beach Cafe, which is a couple of miles away from where he lives, that they run. And he said he started actually working in the cafe because he just needed something to do. But it made him realise that even though he's got this amazing career, that it does take him away a lot. You know, he is very involved. He's very passionate about what he does, and he can become almost quite focused on that. But actually, you know, he's a co-parent with 2 kids.
Yeah, I mean, and that's it. It's maybe one of the really interesting things about the gender identity of men is constructed often through what we can achieve through work and career and things like that. And it's interesting, for example, that one of the insults thrown at you is, "Oh, you don't have a proper job. Are you living off your wife?" In one of these groups. And I guess for a lot of men during the pandemic, that identity, that sense of meaning and purpose that they got from being the breadwinner or going out to work, etc., was quite challenged. I mean, it sort of
absolutely.
Your guys talking about it.
Yeah, there was. I think it was refreshing because a lot of people did actually say, "Look, I've spent more time with my kids than I have done in God knows how long. I realised I'm not going back to that world." You know, that's exactly what happened to me 6 years ago. And they can understand how tricky it is for their partners. But there is that loss of identity. There's that loss of routine. The simple thing of getting on the train and going up to work. You know, you don't have that. You don't have that office relationship anymore. So you kind of lose who you are. Then you've got to struggle with the pressures of homeschooling. You know, I think when it started, I mapped out timetables. I did everything. It lasted about 2.5 minutes. Let's be frank. You know, I was thinking little Johnny's going to do Latin then. He's going to do math. No, he wasn't. You know, we ended up doing really nice things that like going through my record collection. Like, just pick an album, we'll play it, and I'll tell you a story. Or pick a book, and we're on this couch. So I'm here reading. He's there reading. And my lad is very active. He plays football 6 times a week. So get him sitting down and just reading. And then he would read, and he'd start laughing at something. Okay, so tell me about that. And we'd have these completely different conversations than we would have done normally, because all like just keep them active. So I think there's a lot of dads that
a similar experience with my boy. He's got ADHD, so he's okay. We're doing okay with school. We've had to sort of rearrange things, and I've had to sort of steam in and sort of lay down the law with the teachers a little bit, sort of, I've been doing this 30 years, all of that sort of stuff. And but he makes me laugh so much when we're working together on his homework, because he can't sit still because of his ADHD. So he does things like he's got his bunk bed, right, and he hangs upside down from it while we're doing his homework, which I'm sure if he was trying to do that at school, it would be unbearable for the teachers. I think it's the funniest thing in the world. And I'm like getting upside down with him as we're going through his homework. It's been great, to be honest. I've really...
Well, your knees, Noel, you want to watch that, mate, you know?
No, I do upside down like this, mate. That's the great thing. I'm not. It's not me. It's the computer that's going upside down.
Yeah, I should hope so.
Yeah,
But
quite.
it
No,
does.
I'm going upside down. I told you I started yoga, so
Yeah.
inversions are part of it, as you know.
Yeah.
My poor old knees are cronking away at the moment. It's hilarious. I'm definitely not hinged. I'm definitely something's going on, but it's interesting. I think that sort of seeing these figures like Fatboy Slim in the media, guys who are talking about their struggles around life and parenting, but also there seems to be a common theme that I've been sort of hearing a lot, and I've experienced it myself.
Yeah,
is that there's been a real opportunity during this time to say, actually, what I really like about life is my kids and my partner and my family and my home and stuff like that. And I don't
seeing
know
the stuff that. Yeah, I remember when I used to work up in the city quite a lot, so I'd commute. I'd leave really early before my son was getting up, get home just about. If I was lucky enough to put him to bed, I'd miss out on so much of that. But it was okay because I had a good job, we had a nice house, and I was ticking my box as a provider. And it was only, we've touched on this before, the death of my own dad, and the grief came. It knocked me sideways, and it made me really reevaluate what was important.
Yeah,
and it's not having loads of money to buy swanky Lego. Let's go down a second-hand shop, buy some cheap Lego, but I'll sit with you for a couple of hours, hands and knees, and we will play together.
Yeah, and it's interesting for me. Like in the first sort of when the pandemic first started, my first thoughts weren't, because my boy lives in France, but my first thoughts weren't, oh, am I going to survive this? Am I going to die? I was like, oh, they closed the borders. How am I going to get to see him? And it was like, that was the only thing that was important. And I got
a lot of challenges.
Fine.
Yeah, we were, we mentioned earlier, it's not a father's rights group, but we do have dads that are co-parenting or people that are going through quite horrific custody. And unfortunately, the COVID regulations were used against some of them. And one of my close friends, there was more excuses not for him to have access.
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. My boy's mum is just delighted I'm part of his life, because when she gets to go on holiday.
Yeah, it's a balance, isn't it? That's what it should be.
And so we sorted out, but I think it's a really, really tough one in terms of getting access and stuff like that. But we're not really here to talk about that. There's plenty of groups and organisations that focus on that. It is tough, although I think the situation is changing and improving in my experience. So I want to say that to guys that go through it, that you do have to sort of not act out on it, even though you want to. It's just really important not to do dumb stuff. It's really important to stay calm, listen to your solicitor, get support around you, keep your gob sharp most of the time as well. It's the best advice.
It's thinking about the bigger picture.
It really is.
Not the here and now. But yeah, so that's a subject for somebody else to discuss.
Yeah. You've touched on grief, and we're going to come back to it. But I want to stay with this idea of representations of fatherhood in the media, because it is, it's like the most famous father at the moment in the UK is Boris Johnson, and yet, it's like
the man that wouldn't admit how many kids he actually had.
I mean, it's like, I think he's done all right in terms of his latest kid being visible as to some extent and acknowledging, but it's like, and I think about that modelling he provides and the modelling his own father and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I don't want to have a go at the guy because it's a tough job, and I certainly wouldn't want it, to be honest. Yeah. It is a thing. It's almost like, we have to raise questions with Parliament about how anti-family it is.
Absolutely.
But I think one of the MPs, one of the female MPs who was breastfeeding, was told that they had to stop, and I'm like, what do you mean? It's just bang out of order. But from your perspective, Who are the sort of guys who are out there at the moment who you think are sort of getting those messages out that are more positive messages about fathering, etc.?
One in particular is kind of not strange, but it's Tyson Fury, by the boxer.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that, he's a Romany gypsy, and they have very strong family bond. And he's very close to, I think his father is one of his cornermen.
Yeah.
But he's had several books where he's been extremely open about his own mental challenges. Yeah. The fact that he was driving a car and he just wanted to end it. And it's like, look, you're the champion of the world. You have millions in the bank, blah, blah, blah. How the hell can you, the toughest man on the planet, be broken in this way? And his sheer honesty about what he went through and how he rebuilt himself is just so inspiring, because he kind of, in a male role model, the toughest kid in the playground is having troubles, then it's okay for little old me to have troubles. So I think he's doing some really incredible work.
Yeah, I agree with you. And whenever I've heard him talk about his family life, he lights up. Yeah. He's so dedicated to it and to his kids. He wants to be with them.
Yeah, and he can make those choices. It's through sheer hard work and determination that he's got there. But I think there's also a wider narrative here about the changing role of fatherhood. I remember years ago I wrote something called the Dadifesto, because I was so fed up with the representation that dads can't change a nappy. We're seen as a babysitter. You get it out, you take your kids out. Oh, aren't you a good boy for giving mum a day off? No, I'm a parent, or I can use a washing machine. I don't just sit here with a can of beer and TV controls like a 70s sitcom character. Things have moved on. Get with the program. And I'd like to see, I think it has changed, a lot. I still think there's a lot more work that could be done on things like actively, encouraging shared parental leave and giving dads a chance to bond on those early days. I remember when my son was born, I just started my first business, so I had a week off. But even then, I was kind of tinkering away at the same time. But to be able to have that, few months off where it's shared and give you a chance to actually step back and relax and bond with your child is so incredibly important.
Yeah. And absolutely, I'm with you. Sorry, you called me trying to multitask. I was just looking at the phone. I told you I can't do two
it.
Ones. That's what that silence was. I was like, is somebody on the phone? No, hang on a minute. Sort of, there you go. Earlier on, you were talking about the loss of your father and how that sort of, if you like, that event was integral in you sort of setting up this sort of organization and this group. And I loss has been a significant issue, particularly over the last couple of years. A lot of people and a lot of men, because older men in particular have been the highest risk group from COVID. And women have slightly different immune systems to men. We've known that for a long time, and slightly more effective, no, not slightly, a lot more effective immune systems. And so guys have been on the front line in terms of COVID deaths. And fathers have died and grandfathers have died in sort of significant numbers over the last few years, which I guess you can identify with. But it isn't a subject that's ever talked about this openly. Like, nobody says what I say. Well, most a really significant proportion of those deaths have been men, have been fathers and grandfathers, and so there's a lot of guys experiencing loss of their male role models.
Yeah, we don't talk about. I certainly didn't. I had quite a different sort of childhood where my dad had custody of me and my three sisters, which was very unusual in the 70s and 80s. So he was a larger than life character, and unfortunately we lost him about 7 years ago to vascular dementia. So I saw his rapid decline from being larger to being frail. And actually, I was thinking about coming on tonight and talking, and I think there's there's just the grief when he died. I remember coming home from work, and I was the last few months of his life, he was in a care home, and I phoned up talking, and he'd lost the power of speech.
Yeah.
And so the nurse was there, and I couldn't have a conversation with him. And I was on the bus, and I remember I've lost him, even though he's still here. I've lost him, so it was almost a living sort of grief.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell anybody that because it just sounded so stupid. Because he's still physically here, I could go and see him at weekends. I travelled down, and then towards the very last, part of his life, I actually just moved into the hotel room. They gave us visiting hours. That I'm not going, so I moved in for 2 weeks and just slept on his floor.
Yeah.
And God forbid anybody tried to move me. But that was, even then, I didn't discuss it. I just got on with it, and then 6 months down the line, it came along and just went, and it hit me, and I became really ill, and both physically and emotionally and mentally. But that was the change where I go, I don't want to commute anymore. I don't want to have to do this anymore. I don't want to have to do that anymore. I want to understand and be around for my son. So there was some dadless soul in a weird way, that the seeds were planted from death. And that sounds crazy, but it genuinely was.
It makes absolute sense to me, because death and birth are part of the same spectrum or transition. And it's absolutely quite common. In fact, people often talk to me, I had a dream about dying. Does that mean dying? No, it's more likely that what it means is you're starting something. And you sort of embrace grief and death and dying. It's been complicated this last couple of years, not so much now, but it has been complicated by things. And I don't want to get into the sort of down street parties nonsense, but people have been unable to go to funerals and go through that grieving process. And I know Jamie Dornan was writing about it, wasn't he? He was in that film Belfast, wasn't he?
Yeah, the amazing, for those who haven't seen it, go and see it. It's about it's breathtaking piece of cinema.
Right.
It's, long story short, it's Kenneth Branagh's story. Basically, he was a Northern Irish kid when the trouble started, and suddenly neighbours that are Catholic and Protestant basically were just blown apart in any way, shape, or form. So it's,
and they literally built walls and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that
in the middle of houses.
So Jamie Dornan is the dad who is working over in England because he's a chippy, and he comes back and he's trying to negotiate with his wife to try and take them away from the troubles and start a better life in Australia or Canada or something. So it's a beautiful, beautiful film. But I read the fact that he lost his own dad during COVID, and a year later he was still unable to bury him. So he's kind of hadn't come to terms with the grief, but almost doing the movie and playing a dad became a strange kind of therapy for it.
Yeah, I can get it. I can understand that. And there's something about, and I remember talking to sort of news outlets at the beginning of the pandemic, and when we had all these regulations around how people were going to be managed through death, and certainly the closure of those rituals associated with death and dying. You couldn't physically touch people, and you weren't allowed to turn up to bury them and cremate them and so on. And how that was going to have a psychological impact, quite a severe one, because we need those ritual expressions of grief. And particularly, I think, for guys, one of my feelings is this, that I think for a long time we haven't dealt with guys grieving the loss of their fathers and their male mentors, because there's been a more sexy narrative around men hating their fathers and damaged relationships between fathers and sons and all that sort of stuff. And I fit into that narrative in terms of my relationship with my own birth father isn't great for various reasons. I'm not going to embarrass the guy about it or anything like that. I've come to terms with it. But my relationship with my boy is very, very different. Sort of, when I say I'm coming to see you, he's delighted. He's absolutely over the moon that this happened. There's sort of, and so things have changed. So then there's something, I think, I don't know if you experience this, there's still that lag in the narrative, the story, where there's an assumption that sort of boys and dads just don't get on.
I don't know if it is that, but it's also, I think, the part of our role in society is to be the strong one.
Yeah.
So I was more concerned about the impact that it would have on my sisters and my nieces and the women folk, because he was gone. So I had to stand strong, even though they're all incredibly strong women.
Yeah.
Probably stronger than I. But that was the role that I had to
So
assume.
you took that stoic role, as it were,
Yeah.
as the emotional
Shut
role.
up and get on with it, because somebody sort of needs to. But it's that's so damaging, because you're crumbling underneath, and you can't show it for the risk that if you crumble, everybody else will crumble. But you don't realise that it's okay to show weakness, which a lot of us weren't brought up to, be a victim or show any kind of weakness.
There's lots of narratives, there's lots of ways of thinking about it. One of them is that, like, maybe even if it's true, if I crumble, everybody else will crumble. So what? Is my response. It's like losing somebody that you love is meant to break your heart. If you don't feel that broken heart, what's going on? Do you know what I mean? You're meant to feel shit. You're meant to be a mess when you lose somebody that you love. I mean, how could you not? I mean, I think one of the people and one of the men that has very successfully communicated that is Ricky Gervais. I'm not a great fan of Gervais, I have to say. I think he's a multimillionaire who makes a living out taking the piss out of multimillionaires. It's like, whatever. I'm not interested in that, and I'm not interested in his political views. But he has done some great stuff, I think, around opening up this narrative around particularly grief and men. And the first series of what was it called again?
It's Afterlife, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it's profound, and that's it starts with him, trying to commit suicide because he can't get over his wife, and his dog saves him. And I think the second series or the third series, no, the second series is just was released a few weeks ago, and it's one of the highest viewed things on Netflix ever. And just like you, I've never I liked The Office when it came out, but then I think he got exceptionally smug, and he does smug very, very well.
Yeah.
But this, it's very hard to find somebody that's watched that program that wasn't immensely moved by the way that he dealt with the grief and the grieving process, that he fell into a very deep depression, and it didn't matter what was going on. He just felt shit. And there was nothing that could actually crash my. So there's quite a lovely sort of hero's story arc. I don't want to do any, spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it, but I think it's handled impeccably.
I mean, what I have taken, I haven't seen number 2, but I've seen Afterlife, some of that, and one thing that strikes me about it is the psychological maturity of the representation of that man.
Yeah.
And I don't often get to see that sort of in that sort of rawness. I think it's the nature of films and television that they produce caricatures rather than characters, real life characters, and that's just the way it happens. Whatever the gender, whatever the color, and all of that sort of stuff. And I quite like that Marvel Universe stuff. I mean, I really enjoy it. But finding a complex psychological male character like that, I don't see that very often. The other time I really see it is in really good representations of Shakespearean characters. And Shakespeare wrote psychologically profound works, but there hasn't been maleness for quite some time.
I think he did it from my opinion, they did it so beautifully. It was because it was sort of butted against some very dark humour. So at your lowest point, you have that grave side of humour, or you have to laugh, and the bitterness comes out. So not the bitterness, not even the right word, but people show emotion in very different ways. So anger and sadness is very easy to transfer over to humour. So that's what I found, really say.
But I think it's also, I think it's also one of the things that guys do quite a lot with each other. I think women do it as well with each other. But
Yeah.
when we think about men together and putting on services that will support them, which is literally what we're talking about.
Yeah.
The allowing for the capacity for taking the piss, dark humor, joking. Like when I'm doing the social media today, you'd have seen all the millions of posts I did today. Who's your daddy?
Yeah.
Dan Flan. But part of me was like going, well, people get really upset if I use that term, who's your daddy? And it's like, it was automatic for me to make a bit of a joke and take the piss a little bit, because I know you well.
Absolutely,
and that's cool, and that's our relationship, and this is how we talk. But a bit of me was like, am I sort of going to get somebody sort of kicking back and saying, I don't like that, that's a bit sort of sexist, that's a bit this and that, sort of, do you know what I mean?
Always going to be. You're always going to be. There's two sides to it. We say, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of our biggest champions are the mums. But we have the odd naysayer. There's why as a mum can I not come? Well, blah, blah, blah. You're being elitist, you're being sexist. Well, no, the bottom line is that if I walked into a women's toilet in the pub and you're with the girls on a night out having a chat, if I walk in there, that conversation would change. All we're asking is for a couple of hours.
Yeah, and it's not right or wrong, it's just it would change it. Definitely.
It just absolutely would. Yeah. And so the dark humour is very much part of our dad's meetups, because, as we mentioned, we can touch on these, really quite heart-wrenching stories that some of the fellas are going through. And next thing you go, have you seen Bob's shirt? Bob, and just rip the piss out of him.
Yeah.
But it's all done in a very friendly way, and suddenly we can go from, substance abuse and miscarriage and that to taking a piss out of somebody's football team, like that. And that's the beauty of what we do, because it's not facilitated. There's nobody saying that's not actually correct. It's just what we need to do. It's that graveside humour, and it works from us. And if you don't understand, that's your issue, not ours.
Yeah, and just, I think we can probably just touch upon these issues, not really go into them. But I guess some of the things that might come up in people's minds are issues around gender identity, but also about homophobia and anti-racism, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
I know you. I know how it works. I know how inclusive and open you are. But should we make it explicit? Is it worth just...
Yeah, absolutely. There are no social barriers to Dadless Soul. We've got dads on no income, low income. We've got dads that are millionaires. We've got dads that are ex-offenders that are now friends with police officers. It doesn't really matter where you come from, what colour you are, what background. Now, we've even got a Scouser. That's how open we are.
Blimey. I know. You let Scousers in there.
We're letting Scousers in.
When did that happen?
I know. That's our lovely Walshy, who's our new volunteer coordinator.
That's worrying.
I know. We just opened the doors. But it genuinely is. It's those three letters, that DAD. So you're a dad, you're a male carer, you're a granddad, you are welcome. Right. The gender identity thing is not something that we've...
Has it come up yet in your groups?
No, it hasn't. But we'd be very, very open to it, because the bottom line as well is about us teaching our children. And we did have one of our dads within the group whose child was sort of reassigning their gender.
Yeah.
And there was... He said some stuff, and then somebody else came in, some, quite crass, what they thought was funny. Yeah. And it was actually everybody just weighed in and go, oi, no, you're just not having it.
Yeah, just quite.
This is not the place. And maybe you don't understand that this is a time to be educated. Yeah. So he's incredibly, supportive, because the dad himself would have questions, and he'd need to put his hand up. I don't understand this. I want to be a loving and supporting parent, but it makes sense to me.
It frightens me.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So you can do that, but you can do it without judgment. And it's just a very open, frank conversation. So yeah, we are not elitist in any way. I'm a kid of the 70s, so I remember free school meal tables where the kids that couldn't afford it were put on separate tables, so you couldn't actually play with your mates because their mums and dads didn't have as much money as yours. And that's just how it was. It's like, I'm just not having it. You know?
I thought it's worth saying, because I think it's just really important to be clear about with folk who are listening and maybe listening to about what the philosophy here. It's about opening, not shutting down. And I love it. I mean, I really do feel warmth about Dadulthood Soul and the various projects that you put on. And I've been very honoured to be invited along to things and sort of really enjoyed them. But we are coming to the end of the show. We've got a few minutes left. So I want to make sure that we leave enough time to talk about how people get hold of you. We'll do that in a minute.
Yeah.
But also about where you're at right now as an organisation, what sort of things that you're doing at the moment, and what might be your future plans. $1
million
quite
question.
Strong at the moment as an organisation. You've got quite a lot of volunteers and so on.
Yeah, we always need more. So the bottom line is that, if you've got 2 hours to spend and you don't want to stick in front of Netflix and you want to be part of something, give us that. If you've got a tenner spare, give us that.
Yeah.
And it's the idea, I take a tenner from you, 2 hours off you, put it all into this pot, and together we build something. Yeah. So when we did a podcast series last year where we interviewed 6 dads within the arts. So there was quite a very well-known stand-up comedian, there was a film producer, there was a rapper, and we had some very in-depth sort of fatherhood-related chats with them. The audio producer for that was in Canada.
Right.
He was an expat that lived over there that was part of our community. He said, I do local radio. So he was able to give us his time. It isn't just about being on the South Coast. Couple of things we are doing. So we're going to, fingers crossed, relaunch our special send sessions, additional needs sessions.
Brilliant.
I'm in talks with quite a wonderful tech innovation centre in Brighton, because how's this for disgusting, right? City as open and wonderful as Brighton, there is 1 hour per month of dad-friendly activities. And that's a sing and sign group at the library. What happens if you don't want to?
Don't put me on that soapbox right at the end of the show, mate. Seriously.
How you do the wheels of the bus?
Absolutely jaw dropping.
Yeah. What happens if you've got kids at different ages? So, I'm in talks with a wonderful tech innovation centre that have got maker spaces and podcast studios, which is a very trendy co-working space Monday to Friday, but it's empty on a Saturday.
Why are they letting you in? There's nothing trendy about you, Dan.
There's nothing trendy about me.
Seriously, that's like, are they putting a hood over you as they drag you in or something?
How very dare you? But no, what I am good at, the fact is that it's not being used on a Saturday.
Right.
But
none of the trends are there. That's why you can get in. Right. Got it.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I can break it through the back. So yeah, we've got that. We've got some. We're doing a collaboration with St Martin's College of Art.
Nice.
Next month, they've got a program to encourage dads to have really frank and honest conversations about sex with their kids.
Yeah.
We've been approached by Manchester University.
Not sex with them.
No. Don't. As a dad's group, you want to see the sort of abuse and question marks we have with that sort of stuff. Jesus.
I'm sure. I can imagine. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We're just men that want to play with kids. So there's all these different options. The immediate thing is to get maybe 3 to 5 groups up and running within the UK this year.
Yeah,
in different areas. Package it up. We're in talks with 2 social housing providers to go in and develop our work for people that live in social housing.
Right,
because they have some additional challenges.
Yeah.
And maybe they're ostracised or ghettoised or exceptionally, isolated. So we're going to kind of package this up, go over there, go to the cool kids in Brighton, help our fellow dads with additional needs over there.
Yeah.
Basically sprinkle our magic sauce.
Brilliant.
A range of different areas. But we are a small, there are no employees of that. We do this in the evenings and our weekends, and it's done So I want to give a shout out to my lovely partner, Shez, who's Mum La Soul, that spends our date nights.
Hello, Mum.
Yeah, she's dedicated. And Jim Coulson, who does all our marketing, who's based up in Yorkshire. Walshy, who's our new volunteer coordinator. There's a team of really lovely, dedicated people that come together and actually believe in what we're doing and put their time into this.
Well, at some point, somebody needs to sort of go into some funding pocket somewhere and actually give you a serious amount of money, so that
we would very much like that. I think we're okay. Funding is always a challenge for any non-profit. But if somebody was to able to give us a check, we could take this nationwide, and I don't think there's a reason why it should not be in towns and cities across the UK.
I totally agree.
From Berlin, saying, "Can we have it here?"
Yeah.
Yes, you can, but we need to.
We need the jobs. We need the infrastructure resources. So, on that note, how do people get hold of you? What's the website?
So it's www.dadlasoul.com. So DADLASOUL.com. It's Dad La Soul on Twitter, on Instagram, on Mixcloud, on YouTube. We've got a private Facebook group. We've got a public one for everybody, and then there's a dad's one. So if you just put in Dad La Soul in Facebook, that's a lovely community where dads can vent and tell terrible jokes and fashion advice. Or I'm happy if somebody wants to drop me an email.
Fashion advice.
Look, have you seen my hat, dude? Look, right. Let's just not touch on that.
I don't know anybody. I never thought I'd know somebody who dresses worse than me, but you actually make me feel good, Dan. So, on that note, we're at the end of the show.
If you prick me, do I not bleed?
Yeah, well, there you go. Start quoting Shakespeare. Yeah. Whatever. Anyway, we have to leave it there. Dan, you stay with me. It's just great to catch up with you. And now that, because I only know you through Zoom, I've never seen your legs really, except a little bit.
I've got a very well turned ankle.
I'm sure, out there, No, the only reason I'm saying it is because I'm meeting somebody on Saturday that I've known for 2.5 years, and I've never met them. I mean, it's like I feel really close to them, and I've arranged to have a coffee with them, and I'm like, I presume they've got legs, not that I've ever seen them.
I have to take my pajamas off you. But no, I would love to have a beer. Well, actually, I don't drink anymore, but I have a cup of tea with you, and I think you guys are doing some very important work, and got to give a big shout out to producer James because it is his birthday and he's been listening last winter as I'm on.
Yeah, you be nice to him. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to do James. Wild horses. But anyway, happy birthday, James. He's still a baby though. He's only 12.
Oh, yeah, that's just bitter and twisted, old man, isn't it?
It is. It definitely is. We have to leave it there. You say that, Dan. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Next week, I think I've got Mikey Marquardt, who, again, I haven't spoken to in bloody ages. So I'm going to be... Mikey became a dad during the pandemic. So it's one of the reasons I want to catch up with him, really, is to find out how that's all going for him. So we've got him on next week. Lovely to have you all here, folks, and catch up with you next week when I'm going to be off in foreign climes with my boy, having a great time. And I'll talk to Mikey with his boy, having a great time. Dan, lovely to have you here. You stay with us. And I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody for now.
Cheers, guys.